Have you ever noticed that in life, the physical realm has a way of echoing the movements of the spirit? Nothing happens suddenly. Nothing emerges without a trace. Realities, whether divine or dark, announce themselves before they arrive. And sometimes the simplest things in your environment carry signs far deeper than what your eyes can see. There are moments when God uses even the smallest creatures to stir your discernment, to awaken your sensitivity, to make you ask questions you have ignored for too long. Because the greatest danger is not what fights you in the open. The greatest danger is what fights you silently while you are distracted, long before things collapse externally. Something has been eating internally. Long before peace disappears, something has been whispering behind the walls. And long before a home becomes spiritually suffocated, signals were sent. Signals that many people wave off as ordinary. So when I speak today of 7 insects, I'm not calling you to superstition. I'm calling you to discernment. Because sometimes the natural mirrors the spiritual. Sometimes what is crawling around you is a picture of what is crawling into your life. Sometimes what is flying before your eyes is exposing what is flying over your destiny. There are seasons when a sudden infestation in a home is not about insects. It is about atmosphere. Something changed, something entered, something shifted, and heaven is saying, pay attention. The first insect is the ant. Ants do not visit casually, they invade strategically. They appear when there is weakness, open doors, crumbs are allowed to remain. And spiritually, this is the picture of small compromises. The sins we call tiny, the conversations we call harmless, the desires we say everyone has. These are the crumbs in the spirit. And when they remain unchecked, they attract activity you didn't invite. Ants teach us that the enemy does not need a big door. He only needs a crack. He does not need a fallen wall, only a loosened brick. If you find that your home is becoming crowded with little irritations, little arguments, little hidden temptations that keep multiplying, that is the sign that spiritually something has started creeping in because permission was unknowingly given. The second insect is the fly. Flies are attracted to decay. They hover where something is spoiling. They represent spiritual pollution. The kind that enters a home through the gates, what is watched, what is listened to, what is joked about, what is entertained. Flies gather around what is rotten. When a home begins to lose the fragrance of prayer, when spiritual sensitivity becomes cold, when the pursuit of God becomes casual, flies will gather. If you begin to notice that heaviness is now normal, that confusion now sits comfortably, that anger moves freely, that atmosphere has become damp and lifeless, it is a sign that spiritually decay has begun, and it is drawing the attention of what feeds on corruption. The third insect is the cockroach. Cockroaches thrive where things are hidden. They love darkness, clutter, forgotten corners. They are the symbol of secrets, particularly the secrets people are afraid to confront. Cockroaches in the spirit realm point to hidden wounds, hidden bitterness, hidden practices, hidden sins that no one talks about, but everyone feels the impact of. When a home becomes a place where truth cannot be spoken, where confession has died, where transparency has disappeared, cockroaches multiply. And spiritually, this is the environment where manipulation, fear, control, and emotional darkness begin to grow. Cockroaches do not appear where there is order. They appear where there is hidden chaos. The fourth insect is the spider. Spiders weave webs, structures designed to trap. Their presence is symbolic of entanglements, relationships that drain, alliances that confuse, connections that trap destinies. When you begin to sense that everyone in the home is getting stuck financially, stuck emotionally, stuck spiritually, when progress becomes slow, when dreams feel trapped, when opportunities disappear as soon as they appear, that is the picture of a web. And webs do not form suddenly. They appear when the atmosphere has been undisturbed for too long, when prayer has not shaken anything, when spiritual watchfulness has grown lazy. A web is a sign that something is beginning to trap movement. The fifth insect is the moth. Moths look harmless, delicate, even beautiful from afar, yet they eat garments silently. They destroy things of value slowly. Spiritually, moths represent subtle influences, voices that appear harmless, entertainment that appears harmless, counsel that appears harmless, friendships that appear harmless, but they eat away at conviction. They eat away at purity. They eat away at focus. Moths are the symbol of gradual spiritual erosion. You don't notice the damage until the garment is lifted. When people in a home start slowly losing hunger for prayer, slowly losing passion for destiny, slowly losing their fire, something in the spirit has been nibbling at their garments. The sixth insect is the termite. Termites are among the most dangerous because they do their work in silence. They eat the foundation. They weaken structures while leaving the appearance untouched. Spiritually, termites represent inner battles, low self-worth, guilt, condemnation, depression, fear that slowly eat a person from the inside until the outer life finally collapses. When the home becomes filled with tension for no reason, when people begin to break down emotionally, when relationships begin to crumble, when peace collapses without an external cause, something has been eating the foundation. And many homes do not fall because of what attacked from outside. They fall because of what hollowed them from within. The seventh insect is the mosquito. Mosquitoes drain blood. They steal strength. They irritate. They do not attack physically. They attack atmospherically. They represent spiritual irritation, unnecessary battles, strange dreams, night oppression, unusual fear, sudden anxiety, emotional exhaustion. Mosquitoes do not remove life at once. They remove it drop by drop. You wake up tired, you sleep heavy, you feel drained even when you did nothing. Your mind is restless, your peace leaks when you notice that the home has become a place of constant irritation, where even small things trigger conflict, where rest becomes impossible. That is a sign that spiritually something is feeding on the strength of the atmosphere. And when you see these 7 signs, ants of compromise, flies of decay, cockroaches of secrecy, spiders of entanglement, moths of subtle erosion, termites of internal destruction, and mosquitoes of atmospheric draining, heaven is telling you that a shift is needed. It means the home is no longer simply a physical structure. It has become a battleground. And when these manifestations begin to show themselves, you must understand that nothing in the spirit realm announces itself loudly at first. Darkness never begins with a roar. It begins with a whisper. It begins with a shift so subtle that only a discerning heart will catch it. Many homes began to lose their peace, not because someone cursed them openly, but because someone ignored the quiet signs that something was changing behind the veil. The ants were not the problem. The compromise was. The flies were not the problem. The spiritual decay was. The termites were not the problem. What they found to feed on was already weakened. This is why sensitivity is not a luxury. It is survival. Discernment is not for pastors. It is for anybody who wants to protect the atmosphere. 1,000 sermons cannot help a person who has lost sensitivity, because spiritual attack does not always begin with nightmares or strange visitations. Sometimes it begins with atmosphere, a heaviness that suddenly becomes normal, a tension that refuses to leave, a silence that feels loud, a peace that begins to leak. The spirit realm is announcing something, but the question is, who is listening? There are people who have lived so long with spiritual noise that they think it is silence. They have lived so long with oppression that they call it personality. They have lived so long with inner draining that they call it stress. But if you pay attention, the insects in the physical are simply echoing something deeper. They are telling you that spiritually something wants access. Something is knocking. Something is seeking agreement, because nothing can dominate a life it has not first influenced. And nothing can influence a life it has not first found a weakness in. Have you noticed that when the spiritual climate of a home shifts, even animals behave differently. Even children sense it. Even sleep feels different. Even conversations lose warmth. Even laughter feels forced. Atmosphere is a language. Atmosphere speaks. Atmosphere reveals when something foreign has entered. There are homes where the moment you step in, you feel drained. Not because the people are bad, but because something has been feeding on their peace. There are homes where once you cross the threshold, your spirit becomes restless. You cannot explain it, yet you can perceive it. There are homes where dreams become battles. There are homes where prayers cannot rise beyond the ceiling. This is not superstition. This is sensitivity. The enemy has never been intimidated by walls, locks, gates, or alarms. What protects a home is not what surrounds it. It is what fills it. If the atmosphere is unguarded, access becomes easy. And many times, the warfare happening in a home is not external enemies. It is internal doorways. Words spoken carelessly. Music played without discernment. Anger allowed to grow. Bitterness left unchecked. Jealousy allowed to sit. Confusion permitted to linger. Every atmosphere attracts its kind. Peace attracts peace. Light attracts light. But fear also attracts fear. Darkness attracts darkness. Confusion attracts confusion. And these things rarely announce themselves as spirits. They announce themselves as patterns, as irritations, as changes in the environment. When ants invade a home, you don't fight the ants. You remove what attracts them. When flies gather, you don't rebuke flies. You remove the decay. When spiders weave webs, you don't cry over the web. You disturb the atmosphere that allowed the web to remain untouched. When termites eat structures, the real danger is not the insect. It is the hidden weakness. When mosquitoes attack, the real problem is stagnancy, stillness, dampness. So in the spirit, the focus is never the insect. The focus is the condition that allowed the activity. Because in the realm of the spirit, nothing visits without a reason. Nothing stays without an invitation. Nothing grows without an environment that supports it. If your atmosphere changes, something has been permitted. And if something has been permitted, it means attention must return to the gates. Your mouth, your mind, your habits, your emotions, your relationships. These are the places where the enemy negotiates entrance. There are battles you cannot win by shouting. You win them by adjusting. You win them by closing the doors you didn't know were open. You win them by uprooting the weaknesses you didn't know existed. You win them by paying attention to details you thought were insignificant. Because the enemy never looks for what is obvious. He looks for what is neglected. And this is why many people remain under attack for years. They fight the manifestation, but ignore the doorway. They scream at the symptoms, but leave the cause undetected. They rebuke the irritation, but leave the environment hospitable. And until the environment shifts, the activity will continue. Darkness is not intimidated by noise. It is intimidated by order, by purity, by clarity, by peace, by discipline, by light. When a home becomes spiritually bright, insects cannot hide. When a home becomes prayerful, webs cannot hold. When a home becomes purified, decay cannot remain. When a home becomes aligned, compromise loses its power. When a home becomes spiritually awake, draining forces lose their strength. Because atmosphere is louder than words. Atmosphere is louder than declarations. Atmosphere is louder than emotions. If the atmosphere is right, the activity must bow. And there are some of you listening to this right now. You know there is a battle in your home. You have seen the signs. You have felt the shift. You have observed the patterns repeating. You have seen peace disappear slowly. You have watched joy leak daily. You have noticed arguments rising easily. You have discerned that the atmosphere is not what it used to be. You have been sensing that something is not just physical. Something is spiritual. Something is searching for a foothold. And sometimes the most dangerous shift in a home is not loud. It is silent. The kind of silence that makes you uncomfortable. The kind of silence where laughter feels out of place. The kind of silence where you sense that something unseen is watching the spiritual condition of everyone under that roof. When a home begins to carry a weight that no broom can sweep, no air freshener can remove, no rearrangement can fix, that is the sign that you are dealing with something beyond the physical. Notice how ants, flies, termites, and moths all have one thing in common. They never attack the strongest part of a structure first. They always look for weakness. And spiritually, the enemy does the same. He does not attempt to break the strongest part of your life. He looks for where you are tired, where you are discouraged, where you feel wounded, where your guard is down. He identifies where your discipline has softened, where your convictions have become flexible, where your prayer life has become inconsistent. Weakness is always the first doorway. And once he finds a weakness, he builds a pattern. And once he builds a pattern, he forms a cycle. And once a cycle is formed, oppression becomes normal. And when oppression becomes normal, people begin to adapt to darkness instead of resisting it. They begin to say, this is how our home is. Instead of asking, why has our home become like this? This is why discernment must become a daily posture. You don't wait for crisis to be spiritual. You don't wait for nightmares to pray. You don't wait for attacks to awaken. By the time the storm is loud, the cracks were already forming. By the time the termites are visible, the structure has already been weakened. By the time the mosquitoes disturb your nights, the atmosphere has already shifted. Spiritual discernment prevents what prayer might later have to fight. Do you know that even in scripture, the smallest creatures were used by God to reveal mysteries? Locusts, bees, serpents, ravens. Small things carrying big messages. Sometimes the message is not in the size of the creature, but in the condition that attracted it. When your inner atmosphere begins to align with confusion, you attract the activities that thrive in confusion. When your atmosphere aligns with fear, you give permission to what feeds on fear. And when your atmosphere aligns with spiritual laziness, webs begin to grow undisturbed. Some of you have wondered why you can clean your house physically, yet feel dirty spiritually. Why you can open the windows for air, yet still feel suffocated inside. Why you can reorganize your space, yet the heaviness remains. That is because the real issue is not the furniture. It is the frequency. The spiritual frequency of the home has been hijacked, influenced, or disturbed. There is a frequency that welcomes peace. There is a frequency that welcomes clarity. And there is a frequency that welcomes oppression. And everything in your home contributes to that frequency. The conversations you allow, the people you entertain, the music that plays, the emotions you feed, the habits you tolerate, the thoughts you dwell on. These things don't just shape your day, they shape your atmosphere. Even the enemy understands the law of atmosphere. He knows that if he can control the atmosphere, he can control the people inside it. He knows that if he can influence the environment, he can influence the decisions. He knows that if he can tamper with harmony, he can weaken unity. And once unity is weakened, spiritual authority in the home is compromised. Have you noticed that a home under spiritual attack becomes a place where small things become big fights? Where conversations escalate unnecessarily, where misunderstandings become frequent, where suspicion grows, where joy feels temporary, where rest becomes difficult. That is not coincidence, that is atmosphere. The spiders of entanglement have begun their work. The mosquitoes of irritation have begun to drain peace drop by drop. And if you pay attention, you will notice the signs show up first in the most sensitive people, children, spiritually alert individuals, those with prophetic gifting, those with tender hearts. They feel the shift before others notice it. They sense the heaviness before others can describe it. They pick up the spiritual noise before others acknowledge it. But because many homes lack the language for spiritual sensitivity, these feelings are dismissed as overreaction. There's nothing ordinary about a home where peace suddenly becomes fragile. There is nothing ordinary about a home where sleep becomes warfare. There is nothing ordinary about a home where a simple disagreement becomes a tear in unity. Something is happening behind the veil, and the insects in the natural realm may simply be mirroring the disorder in the spiritual realm. And when the disorder is internal, external activities begin to multiply. You may see more crawling things, more flying things, more disturbances that seem harmless but carry meaning. Because the spirit realm often reveals inward conditions through outward patterns. If the ants of compromise are crawling around, it means cracks have formed. If the flies of decay are gathering, it means something within has begun to spoil. If the termites of inner battles are active, it means foundations are weakening. And if the mosquitoes of spiritual draining begin to multiply, it means strength is being slowly extracted without your awareness. And when you begin to notice that the spiritual strength of the home is leaking, that is when you must pay even closer attention. Because nothing drains a home faster than unnoticed spiritual interference. The most dangerous form of attack is the one that feels normal. The kind you grow used to, the kind you live with, the kind you justify, the kind you no longer question. There are families right now who have learned to function under a cloud that was never meant to hang over them. They wake up tired, go through the day weary, speak to each other with frustration, and sleep with heaviness. And they call it life. They call it stress. They call it personality. But in truth, something has been feeding on the atmosphere for too long, and no one has stopped long enough to ask, who opened the door? When did this enter? What attracted this atmosphere? Because what enters a home spiritually does not always enter through a ritual or an attack. Sometimes it enters through emotional neglect, sometimes through unforgiveness, sometimes through anger that stays overnight, sometimes through envy that is never addressed, sometimes through relationships that carry spiritual dust, sometimes through the content consumed in the home. Darkness does not always need a ritual. Sometimes it only needs agreement. And if you pay attention, the signs are always there. The ants of compromise multiplied when self-discipline is no longer taken seriously. The flies of spiritual decay show up when prayer becomes casual and worship becomes optional. The cockroaches of hidden issues spread when truth is replaced with pretense. The spiders of entanglement weave webs when spiritual stillness becomes normal. The moths of subtle influence nibble away at conviction when discernment sleeps. The termites of inner battles eat away at emotional stability when healing is avoided. And the mosquitoes of irritation drain strength when peace is not protected. All these activities point to one thing. Something has shifted in the spiritual climate of the home. Have you ever walked into a place and felt your spirit tighten? You couldn't explain it, yet you knew something was not right. You smiled externally, but internally something in you was alert. And have you ever entered another home and instantly felt peace, as though something inside you exhaled? That is because atmosphere is not imaginary. Atmosphere is spiritual. The wrong person can enter a home and bring a smell in the spirit. The wrong energy can sit in a room and change the temperature of conversations. The wrong influence can speak a word and alter the emotional balance of those listening. That is why you must be careful who you let speak freely in your home, who you allow to settle, who you give emotional authority to. Some people don't just visit with their personality, they visit with their atmosphere. And if the atmosphere of your home is already fragile, one wrong influence can tilt the entire spiritual balance. One angry person can shift the climate for hours. One bitter conversation can open a door for heaviness. One careless argument can mark the beginning of unnecessary spiritual traffic. You must understand the enemy does not always kick down the door. Sometimes he waits for you to open it through your reactions. He waits for frustration to create a crack. He waits for fear to soften your guard. He waits for discouragement to dim your sensitivity. He waits for emotional exhaustion to make you spiritually careless. And when these cracks appear, the spiritual insects, the symbolic manifestations, simply respond to the environment. They are attracted to what the atmosphere supports. If the atmosphere supports peace, peace multiplies. If the atmosphere supports confusion, confusion multiplies. If the atmosphere supports strife, strife multiplies. If the atmosphere supports oppression, oppression multiplies. Atmosphere is always a magnet for its kind. This is why certain homes thrive effortlessly. Their atmospheres align, their conversations carry weight, their habits protect peace. Their silence is not empty, it is full of presence. Their nights are restful, their dreams are clear, their relationships are stable, their joy is protected. But other homes seem to be in constant warfare, not because they are cursed, but because the atmosphere has not been guarded. Spiritually, the windows are open, the doors are unprotected, The foundations are unattended and the walls are thin. And in such places, the signs begin to appear. Maybe not physically at first, but emotionally, mentally, atmospherically, until finally the outward manifestation mirrors what has been happening in the invisible realm all along. Some of you listening know exactly what I mean. You can sense that something is not as it used to be. You can feel that the climate has changed. You can tell that joy has thinned out. You can discern that something subtle has been feeding on your strength. You can see the patterns forming. You can sense the spiritual insects echoing something deeper. And now, after everything that has been revealed, the message is clear. Nothing in your home is too small to ignore. Nothing in the atmosphere is too insignificant to dismiss. The enemy does not wait for the perfect moment. He waits for the unguarded one. And the smallest spiritual shift can become the doorway for the greatest spiritual battle if you do not rise in discernment. Your home is not just where you live. It is where your destiny sleeps, where your peace breathes, where your purpose gathers strength. You cannot allow compromise to crawl freely, decay to gather silently, or draining forces to feed quietly. You cannot permit webs of entanglement to settle in corners of your life, or termites of inner battles to weaken your foundation unnoticed. If the enemy studies your environment, then you must guard it. If darkness observes your habits, then you must fortify them. If spiritual insects mirror deeper realities, then you must confront those realities with light, with intentionality, with authority. Do not wait for storms to rise before you stand. Do not wait for chaos to manifest before you awaken. Discernment is protection. Sensitivity is defense. Atmosphere is a shield. What you permit will remain. What you confront will flee. What you cleanse will stay pure. So today, let every insect that has been symbolic in this message become a reminder. If something is crawling in your home, something has been creeping into your spirit. If something is draining in your atmosphere, something has been feeding on your peace. If something is shifting in your environment, something is speaking in the unseen. Guard your home with vigilance. Guard your atmosphere with discipline. Guard your destiny with intentionality. Because the moment you take back the environment, every hidden activity loses its strength. And when your home becomes a place of light, everything that thrives in darkness must disappear without negotiation. Your home was never meant to host confusion. It was meant to host glory. Your atmosphere was never meant to nurture oppression. It was meant to nurture peace. Your life was never meant to be a battleground for insects. It was meant to be a dwelling place for light. Rise, defend your space, claim your atmosphere, and let everything not aligned with God's purpose lose its ground in your home.